on. There we go. Okay, so this session is being recorded. Just so everybody knows, thank you for joining us for our advisor breakfast today. For your record, we will be having these on the final Wednesday of the month. Same location, food will be provided, always at 10 a.m. That said, if there's one you're not able to make, we do try and record those. And as long as whoever our presenter is comfortable with it, we then share that to YouTube. So if you miss the content, that's a way you can catch up as well. Go ahead and check out our YouTube student engagement at ASU. There's already a lot of great content on there, ranging from how to navigate Sun Devil Sync, great videos for your student leaders to use, and a lot of good content for you, including our November session, where Career and Professional Development Services came and spoke. So lots of great content. That said, continuing to move forward, kind of walking you all through a bit of what we're going to focus on today. Fair warning, today's session might be a little bit shorter. We want this to be a chance for you to have your questions answered. So for starters, we want to hear what topics you'd like to know more about. Are there departments or groups at ASU you'd like to hear about, specific topics you'd like content on, that sort of thing. So we're going to start with that portion, and then we'll move into time for you all to ask what questions you may have. Okay? So for starters, we do have some things in place already for this semester. Counseling Services has agreed to present in our March advisor breakfast, right before we head into April, where exams are coming up, the close of the semester. Maybe you've got students who are graduating who maybe stressing a little bit about what comes next. Those sort of things are coming into play. That's when we will have Counseling Services presenting as a great resource for you. And again, that Career Services video is still available online, so you can share that with students as well. We're looking at some other options, but we'd really like to hear from you. Are there topics, are there departments at ASU you'd like to hear and know more about, especially ones you think that would benefit you as an orgs advisor, or ones you get questions about that you'd like to have that information to share with your students? I see a hand. Yes.
I think it'd be great to have someone come in and talk about sustainable events. ASU is big on sustainability, and I think it's engineering. They have a place you can rent things like tablecloths and stuff like that. Recently I went on the link and it's not active, but I think having someone come in to talk about those resources, especially for our students, would be super cool.
Absolutely. So someone to come in and speak about sustainability. Yes.
Related to that, there are about 20 sustainability related plans. That would be probably a good opportunity to bring those plans together and work in collaboration.
Yeah.
I have a quick issue. It's a footnote, but it's maybe a big issue for some students. I got an email yesterday from my student club saying that they have lots of problems booking a room in MU or here. So they're asking me to book the room for them as a professor. They say as a professor, they give priority to professors and not to student clubs. Yeah, I don't know if that's an issue that's affecting other clubs too, and how do we address it?
Yeah, and that is a great question. A part of that is just, we've got 800 clubs and there is not enough room for 800 clubs to meet all at once, especially when you add in classes and other things going on and just availability of space. You're absolutely right. It is a concern. And with that idea in mind, we can certainly work with our partners with Event Meeting Services, who manage not only room reservations in the MU and Student Pavilion, but also tabling. So if you're interested in that experience, and also working with our partners with classrooms to whether it's coming and presenting or just sharing that information in a method that will be available for you to share with your students and do that sort of thing. We'll work on that.
Yeah, it was for an event that they were organizing and they had everything ready by the room.
Got it. And that is, while we work on getting that content for you, one good starting point is maybe working with your students on flexible thinking for spaces. Maybe you have it set up with an idea of a room like this, and this room may not be available. Are there other options that you can get a similar experience or adjust the experience to work? It's a great program planning opportunity for students. That said, I understand the concern and I appreciate you bringing it up, and we will definitely work on getting that information to make that process smoother for you all. Yes.
If it's okay, I just want to speak to that. And some of that is just the MU I know is understaffed. And so they're struggling to respond to that. So there's some of that they're doing the very best that they can too. So it's not even about a functionality of it not being the right process. It's just taking them a little bit longer to get through. I know that if your students actually go in and say, hey, you know, if they put it in time, making sure they have enough lead time, like that they need to know that. But then if you go in, a lot of times they'll work with your students to be like, actually, let's take a look at it right now. And they'll get it through a little faster too. Just letting them know sometimes that in-person visit will help because they do have so much in the MU to go through. I
Speaking,
hope that's not
no, absolutely.
overstepping. I just know that we had that come up with one of our student orgs as well.
That's perfectly fine. Speaking of, is everyone aware of where event meeting services are, should you or your students choose to go in person? So it's on the 3rd floor of the Memorial Union. Realistically, the only ways to get to said 3rd floor
Already
are
know that, yeah.
the elevators that are near the information desk or the stairs over by Mid-First Bank in the Memorial Union. Those will take you to the 3rd floor, where you can go and visit them. I will note reservations there. It is going to have to be the students who make the reservation. So if that's the route they want to go and visit in person, definitely encourage your students to take the time to go and say hi. Okay. Other topics from those in the room, those online. If you're online, please share it in the chat. Okay, so we covered a little bit there. What topics would you like more information about? The other piece is what departments you would like to maybe know more about. We've had career services come in. We've talked about having counseling services come in. Are there others that you feel you'd like to know more about or would be beneficial for you in your role as an organization advisor? Again, this is whether they end up coming and presenting at a session like this, or we work to just have that content available to you more readily in a method that works for you. Yes.
I think it'd be great to have change makers maybe come and figure out how we can better partner. They're so good. And I think our students are always looking for ways that we can actually partner and do that. And so figuring out what does it look like for our students that want to do something like that to actually engage with change makers so that it becomes
Absolutely.
just a little bit more seamless in serving around campus.
Absolutely. Changemaker, for those who may or may not be aware, is an organization on campus that focuses on things ranging from service to sustainability to entrepreneurship and innovation. They have physical locations on each of the campuses you can go and see. They have staff on each of the campuses and student staff who focus on these projects and efforts and initiatives. If you heard of things like Sparky's Day of Service, Ignite, those are some very popular events that they have historically held and put on. If you are interested in working with them or your students are interested in working with them, definitely go to the physical locations, see if you can chat with some of the students. If you feel like you're still struggling, feel free to connect them with myself or Alex here in Tempe for the moment, and we'll get you connected with the correct staff member and student staff for making that move forward. But thank you very much. That is a good point. Others. Okay. So in that case, now I want to turn it over to you. What questions, what things would you like us to offer clarity where we can? Knowing that there are some things we are in the process right now of setting up registration for next year. That is going to launch on April 1st. That's when you'll be able to go in and your students will be able to go in and re-register the organization moving forward. Hopefully that's not a surprise to anyone because that's something that happens every year, but just be aware that that is coming. Outside of that, what questions do you have? What would you like us to clarify for you? Yes.
Primarily the questions I get from my org are regarding funding. And so I don't know if USG could give some clarification. Otherwise, I don't get the other question, but that is something I'd like to get clarification on.
Sure. So as far as the actual steps and process, there are some good starting points. Again, our YouTube channel has a couple of videos that walk you through that process, both from requesting the funding and then submitting the paperwork after. There are some things, because it is a student-run process through USG, there are some things that you'll have to work with them directly on. So another good starting point can be going directly to the USG team. They're on the 2nd floor of this building. for those who are joining us digitally, we are in the student pavilion on the Tempe campus. So USG Tempe is located there. There is for USG a specific one for each campus. So you want to make sure you know which one your org is requesting those funds from. They are working through the process of making that streamlined no matter the campus, but you do want to keep that in mind that locations may vary, things like that. As far as going in, the earlier the better. As much as difficult as it can be, all the information you need is online. What we find a lot is that students will do like zoom through the Canvas training and then submit something, and then they've missed a few steps that if you take the time to go through the training are laid out. Sometimes there's a few more areas. The prohibited items list is an important one that we will sometimes see students requesting things from, but it's an item that ASU funds cannot be used to pay for. The other piece that we like to clarify when it comes to funding is essentially what you're asking is for USG to pay for this item. A lot of orgs are under the impression that once they're approved, the funds will be transferred to them and then they can spend them. That is not the way the USG process works. Your org is submitting the paperwork saying, we'd like to get these funds to use for this. USG says, yes, but no. And then from there, you submit the actual paperwork, the invoice in particular, and USG will pay it off. So just some clarity there. Bare minimum, you're going to want 4 weeks to get something submitted, just because there are hundreds of these that are being navigated and submitted quite regularly. They are working through them as quickly as they can, but that's why the earlier the better. So that's kind of a starting point there. Does that help at all?
So there is a training and that's on the YouTube channel, or is that like a Canvas?
So there is an actual Canvas training that the students have to complete. Whoever's submitting has to complete this Canvas training. If you Google ASU USG, you'll find the specific one for your campus, the specific page, training, and all of those details. That's going to be the best starting point for your student. They won't even be allowed to move forward in the process if the person submitting the request has not successfully completed that training with a perfect score on the quiz. So
Can you
one of
sell
those,
in the Canvas? I'd like
Yes.
to take the training.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
as long as you have access to an ASU, right, you are able to self-enroll and go through it. Again, though, it does have to be the student submitting, but you can go through it so you have the knowledge to help them navigate that process. Liz, to clarify, Liz, were you asking about the distinguished orgs? Yes, I see some responses there. Link for resources. So as advisors, everyone should have completed the student organization advisor training. If you have not, if you need that link, feel free to respond to the email that went out today about, or yesterday rather, about this advisor breakfast, and I will get you that link. But that training is great. Not only, yes, there's the portion of the video at the beginning, the quiz you go through, but there's also a section on campus-specific resources. This will cover things like links to the funding opportunities, links to the various reservation request processes, in particular classrooms, and then the MU, student pavilion, and the mall spaces around those buildings. So there's a lot of great resources there. If there is something else you feel is missing, again, feel free to reach out and ask us, and we'll do our best to get that information to you. I see a hand here first.
Once we do the training and we complete it, it's done, or we need to do it every year or every 2 years?
As of now, you will have to do the training every year. Again, you may go through it annually and nothing changes, but this is our way. It serves both as a way of making sure you're up to date with any information that may have changed in the past year, and it's your way of confirming for us, yes, I have still agreed to serve this organization. Because we have had students who have submitted and we reach out to the advisor says, I never agreed to advise that group. So it's our way of just saying, yes, you have agreed to serve as the advisor for this group and take on that responsibility. So it does take some time, but it is our way of trying to protect you as well.
It's a long way to say yes.
Yes.
What do we do if advisors change somewhere in the middle of the academic year, let's say?
Currently, if your advisors change mid-year, the important pieces are going to be getting them changed and added to the Sun Devil Sync page. They have to be added with their ASU email address. You want to make sure they do meet the requirements. And those vary a little, but the major ones you need to know is if they are on the faculty side of the house within ASU, they need to have the title, their official title needs to include professor or lecturer. It can be professor of practice, assistant professor, professor, whatever. It can be senior lecturer, etc. But it has to be one of those two titles. And they have to have been with ASU for 2 years. If they are a staff member, they have to have been within the field working with students for at least 3 years. And then I know there are a few other exceptions. I think we've got a few of our core friends within the room. If like to chat about that, let's chat out.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Courtesy affiliates always used to be okay to apply.
As long as they've gone through the training to be approved as courtesy affiliates, then yes. Let's see. We covered that one. Were there other questions? Any other questions in the room? Okay. So again, I'd like to thank you. Oh, yes.
One quick question about funding. You were saying that the students apply to the campus in which the club is located, but some clubs are inter-campus.
Correct.
And some students from different campuses, also undergraduates and graduates.
Yes.
So how do you deal with those situations?
So they would need to submit a request. So the question was, if you have an org that is across multiple campuses or a group that covers undergraduate and graduate students. If that is the case, there are a couple of pieces you would go through. Typically, you would submit the application to the different groups. But there's the other aspect you want to take into consideration is who those funds are serving. If you're an org that serves graduate and undergraduate, but you're applying for event funding that only undergraduate students can attend, under USG is where you need to apply. And then you need to decide which campus is going to have the highest attendance. If you're applying for an event that anyone can attend and you are your org represents graduate students and undergraduate students, then that gives you have a few other places you may want to apply. That may actually be common feedback. If you do this and only apply to GPSA, they may respond. GPSA is Graduate and Professional Students Association. They may respond and say, yes, we'll provide this much, but because you're also serving undergrad, you need to look to these other sources of funding, things like that. So the two questions are, who is the org, or the big question is, who is the org serving with the funds? And that will decide on whether you need to apply to just your campus or other campuses. Does that answer? Okay. Yes.
Not a question, just a comment on that, because I have like two boards that's both undergrad and graduate.
Sure.
The timelines are different.
They are. Yes.
GPSA is kind of tricky. They want you, if you have an event in March, you need to submit the request by February 1st. Even though it reads kind of differently, I've had, talk to them about that. It needs to be more clear. So if you have both undergraduate, we have a difficult time accessing the grad funds because of the timeline and sort of, I think we're downtown based too, so I think there's a little bit of separation there. But yeah, so it gets pretty complex if you just need to plan ahead, and I think the challenge with that is the students need to plan ahead.
Yes.
To get them to do things, to sit down at the beginning of the semester, to lay it all out.
Correct.
And then it's much easier there. I've been doing this since 2012
Absolutely.
as an advisor, so yeah.
So for those joining us online, the clarification was the GPSA process, the timelines do differ. For undergraduate students, typically, if you're 4 to 6 weeks ahead, that's kind of what the timeline they're looking at. What that means is if your event is at the end of March, applying by the end of February will give you that time. GPSA's process is different. They require you to apply by the first of the month before your event. What that means is that same event at the end of March, instead of applying at the end of February for GPSA, you would need to apply by the 1st of February. Again, professionals, we're used to these timelines and navigating these things and managing these things, but it's a great opportunity to provide some of that professional development for your students, encouraging them to be aware of these timelines, to focus on those details, planning the semester ahead, which can be very tricky with students and trends and all this other fun stuff. But with GPSA, that's part of the process you're looking at, is that different timeline. So thank you very much for mentioning that. Yes.
I have one other question. in Sun Devil Sync, I receive notifications when my student org is planning an event, and every single event, general body meeting.
Sure.
And it indicates that I need to do something for approval, but when I go in, it's like not approved by me. So do I just need to vote like yes on, or
You
do I
are,
need to be looking through the description? Because sometimes I see misspelled words, and obviously it's a training opportunity and there's different things, so. Do I need to look through those thoroughly and before I click yes to vote, or will someone else not approve the event if something's wrong on there?
so when a student submits an event, as the advisor, typically you will get that notification. Do you approve this? You approving it or denying it is entirely up to you. It is not a required part of our process. What happens on our end when those events are submitted, our staff will review it. During the semester, this happens daily. It's about 1 to 3 times a week when it's not active classes in the fall and spring. So you may need to plan a couple days ahead in the summer, for example. But our staff will review it. We verify that there is a specific location. What I mean by that is saying student pavilion is not enough. You need the room in the student pavilion, or you need to stay outside of the student pavilion so we know you're using the space in front, for example. So you have to have a specific location. We look to see, are there other details that should be aware of within university policy? Are you bringing a speaker in? Okay, have you considered all these details? Are you having food? Have you taken the appropriate steps? Have you gone through the process to make sure your vendor is approved? That sort of thing. If you're using it, if you're getting food within the student pavilion or Memorial Union, are you aware that you have to use Aramark, for example? So our staff will review all of those things and then approve it. A lot of students will ask the question, well, what if I don't know which room we're in yet? That is okay. Go ahead and put the room you would like to have, because once it's approved and once you have the confirmation of a reservation through EMS, through classrooms, you can go in and change it with the new location. Our staff will then, as long as that's all the changes, we'll go ahead and approve. Does that help? Okay. So long story short, you as advisors getting that notification is more so you're aware of it. There's no requirement on your part to approve or deny it. If you choose to turn those off, you can do that through your settings found in the user drawer on Sun Devil Sync. That's that little either letter or picture that appears in the top right. So, okay. Other questions? Yes.
Well, I guess I have a question in regards to the room, just because there is quite a backup of getting room approvals right now.
Sure.
Is that going to, and I know you just said that if they just give a suggestion of what room they want, what is your timeline of when you actually need that room reservation? Since there is, even as a staff member, the part getting the room.
Ultimately, for the orgs, as long as they have the reservation of the room before the actual event, that's what matters. Again, our timeline during the semester, during the fall and spring semesters, we try and get all of the events reviewed within 1 business day. So if they say that, what that means, because sometimes students aren't aware of that whole business day thing. We'll get students who will submit stuff at 6 p.m. on Friday, and then are emailing us at 6 a.m. on Saturday, 6 a.m. on Sunday. So we try and let them know we try and respond within 1 business day. That's really the only timeline on our end that they really need to be aware of. Anything else? Are we seeing anything in the chat? Wonderful. Well, again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We thank you for your time. We thank you for your presence here with us. Please enjoy some food for those here in the room before you leave. Please make sure you have signed in. There's a sign-in sheet on the table. We will be back here next month for our final Wednesday advisor breakfast. Well, the one in February, the final Wednesday in February, which is the 22nd. We'd love to see all of you with us again. For those who would like to go back and review some of this material, we will be providing this recording online within the next week. Again, check it out on our YouTube channel. And then finally, if you do have additional questions, Alex, myself, Laura will be here after. For those who are on other campuses, we do have, oh, come on. We do have contact for each of the different campuses available for you as well. make sure to take a screenshot of that if you need it, take a picture. So that way you can reach out to them, but it can also be found in the Student Awards handbook. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
There.